It's a war that's reshaped European security and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. But what happens when the battlefields of Ukraine do eventually fall silent? Whenever that point comes, we now know that British troops will be heading there, deployed alongside a French contingent as part of a reassurance force. But the British Army is already stretched, with 30,000 soldiers less than it had at the height of combat operations in Afghanistan. So the question is, can this Ukraine mission really be done?
Even a brigade, if you deployed it for 6 months as an operational deployment, therefore you had 2 brigades a year, you wanted to do no more one deployment in 3 years. That's 6 brigades worth of combat power being committed over a 3-year period and in rotation. That is a significant lift. There's no two ways of putting that. A slightly cheaper and more practical way of doing this that requires a different mindset would actually be to forward base a brigade, effectively going almost back to the arms plot days, but forward basing the brigade like we used to do in Germany. And of course, one of the reasons we did that in Germany was because it was cheaper. It was a better way to sustain forces. You could have families with people, you could establish life support, you had host nation support, and you weren't taking people away from their lives to the same extent as you do on a regular operational tempo. So that is an option that could be considered to mean that basically we would deploy one brigade that would be permanently committed to Ukraine for a number of years.
Another question is the size of this reassurance force. Numbers of 10 to 20,000 troops have been mentioned. The British and French soldiers would be some distance from the line of contact. They'd be involved in monitoring the ceasefire, training Ukrainian troops, and setting up military hubs across the country. But if Russia broke that ceasefire, which many think is highly likely, they'd also need the capability to defend themselves and potentially fight the Russian army.
We've said in the past that it's not just there to be a hostage. The force must be able to fight and protect itself in the sort of environment we're talking about. Obviously, you need to have quite a focus, therefore, on potentially air defence, drone defence for sure, and more advanced threats and warfighting, similar to seen in Estonia. So it does suggest it's an armoured presence, at least to some degree. It doesn't suggest purely a light role brigade. That would be able to fulfil training objectives, and it certainly would be able to do some tasks, but the credibility of that to me would be more suspect. That said, if it's very much there to be a backstop based in Western Ukraine, there to help grow and develop the Ukrainian forces, light role may be more suitable.
This ground force would be supported by RAF jets and some sort of maritime component to help clear the Black Sea of Russian mines. But in order to not become a mere speed bump in the way of an overwhelming Russian force, they'd need one thing in particular, the promise, if they required it, of American firepower, the so-called US backstop.
So the current proposals we've been hearing for a period of time is that the US would provide air power support, it would provide intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance support, and overarching mechanisms as a guarantee of safety to Ukraine without ever basing forces in Ukraine. So the US, I think, has already made it clear it's not going to put forces in Ukraine, but it would backstop. At that point, I think if all other ground forces were also a backstop force, I think Ukraine would feel they have very few guarantees. And also for the UK and France, we are then at that point relying that the US will meet its commitment to support us. So I think both of those things tie together in that regard as to how the US commitment, the British commitment, French commitment, and Ukrainian willingness to accept a guarantee come together.
All of this, of course, is moot if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to it, and right now that seems highly unlikely. Keir Starmer says any deployment would be put to a parliamentary vote. Only then would we find out the makeup of any UK force and how many British boots will be put on Ukrainian ground. Simon Newton, BFBS Forces News. Thanks for watching. For more from BFBS Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.